All right. Hello, everyone. So I
Hello.
am super excited. I'm super excited to introduce you all to a woman who I met about 2 years ago, and she's helped me quite a bit in my own path. She's extremely inspiring to me and has a very clear, precise way of not only passing the kinds of spaces that she is in her healing work, but also does a tremendous amount for fertility, for women, for birthing, for pregnancy, and also has incredible healing abilities and has been studying pretty avidly her healing path for quite a long time. So this is Corinne Welder, and she is, hi Corinne, welcome.
Thank you.
She's an energetic medicine practitioner that's trained under a spiritual tradition and has a background in Chinese medicine, is currently working on getting her acupuncture license and specializes, like I said, in fertility, pregnancy, and birth. So there's a lot of really special things that I find quite unique about the work that you do. And I'm really excited to share you and be part of your kind of coming out into the world more and more. Is
Thank
there
you so
anything?
much for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to anything I shared so far?
Sure. Yeah, I started studying Chinese medicine 10 years ago at the same time as I found my spiritual tradition. So my healing work and my spiritual path have been very intertwined since the beginning. And then I practiced Chinese medicine in Austin for about 3 years before moving to Northern California to do full-time practices and study energetic healing with my spiritual tradition. And then a couple years ago, I moved to the Bay Area, and I've been starting my practice over again here, both doing energetic healing and then working on getting my acupuncture license in California because every state's different. But I've been focusing on my energetic healing path and building up um, building up my practice in that way for now.
Beautiful. And yeah, to give you guys a little bit of context, I've talked a small amount about a school that I go to that I live at right now. And so it's the same spiritual tradition that we both study under. And Corinne's obviously been studying for quite a bit longer than I have. And so, yeah, she's in the Bay Area. If you're in the Bay Area, definitely be in contact with her. At the end of this interview, she has a group called Tea and Fertility that is this for if you're interested in kind of work that she's doing, where she'll be broadcasting more and just doing more live feed stuff. So yeah, so let's just dive in. There's a lot of stuff that we have to cover, and I'm really
Yes.
excited to do so. The first question that I wanted to ask you is just to get a sense of you, because I think a lot of the time as healers we can kind of there's so much about the work that we do, and yet it's such a fundamental part of the connection that we have with the people that we work with, and that's very personal and it's very intimate. So to just get a sense of the you that's behind the scenes of all
Mm,
of the profound things that you do is, what is your favorite part about the work that you do?
that's such a hard question. It's like asking your favorite song. My favorite
There's
part.
more than one answer.
My favorite part would probably be so the reason that I've gotten into the spiritual tradition is to see behind the surface of things, to see deeply into the essence of something. And that attracted me to Chinese medicine in the beginning, and also to the clear vision work, which is all about seeing behind the surface of things, seeing deeply. That's vision. And so I've applied that method of seeing to everything that I've learned in Chinese medicine and the energetic body. And so, yeah, I just love getting really deeply to the essence of something, and working with people there, like working with the essence of who someone is, at the level of their higher self. but also working with the essence of fertility and pregnancy and birth. There are these beautiful forces and spiritual beings that uphold this amazing, magnificent creation of a new life. And so getting to work at that level is so profound and beautiful to me.
Beautiful. Yeah, well articulated. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot, it feels like a lot of what you do is you bring these spaces of that are tend to be more mysterious into a level of tangibility in a certain way to the women that you work with, and into something that's very like birth is very physical, fertility is very, well, we see it as very physical most of the time in this day and age, even though in a lot of different traditions, and you go back to tribal ways, and it was very much this spiritual experience through the birthing process. And so it's interesting to me that, you know, that we've come into the world that we're in right now, and birth has been kind of, it's just been turned into a business basically, where it's very material. It's just something that we do. It's undervalued significantly in the amount of intensity that it has, like the forces that it takes to birth, what women go through. And so it seems like you give such a beautiful level of context to not only that whole process and all of the different levels that women experience during that process, but also how to help nourish, nurture, ground, and create this really not only a fertile ground in the physical body of women, but also energetic fertility for women to be able to really bring life into the world through themselves. And so I would love to just hear about that. You know, I know we've talked about sexuality and its relation to fertility, the importance of, you know, inhabiting your body. And so wherever you want to dive in on this topic, go for it.
Well, first I want to start with something that you talked about, and it's basically the foundation of the work that I do, and it's that we are more than our physical bodies. And the medicine, allopathic medicine, is all about the physical body. And so that's amazing. And yet we're so much more than that. So if the level of disease or dysfunction is happening not in the physical body, you know, if the source of what's happening is not a physical malfunction, but an energetic or a spiritual or even like a mental belief system, it's like something that's happening there, like the source of what you're going through and experiencing is not necessarily in the physical body. And so if it's not, then physical medicine can't really help you and heal you. Maybe it can give you a Band-Aid, maybe make you feel a little bit better, but it doesn't actually get to the deep root of what you're experiencing. So the realm that I work in is all of these other realms, you know, and they affect the physical body, but you know, I'm filling in where physical medicine is leaving off. So I'm working with your energetic body.
Question
about that. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I was just curious about how many of the women that come to you or that you work with have already tried to go to doctors. Like, is that a common experience for you, that women have tried to go to doctors before that only deal with the physical and then haven't experienced very tangible results?
Well, yeah, definitely, especially in the realm of fertility and pregnancy. Women are going to have their OBGYNs, they may even have their reproductive medicine doctors, and that's totally fine. Like, I'm very happy working with their OBGs. I'm not against by any means them working with medical doctors, because, you know, that's the world we live in, and I think they should do that. And you know, there's so much more to it. And so that's where I'm really focused with women, because there's so much to fertility. Like, from a spiritual perspective, it's a really big deal, because before we are born, before we are inhabiting these physical bodies, we are spiritual beings. And so the experience of like creating a new life and birthing a baby is the experience of a spiritual being inhabiting a physical body. Like, that's a huge deal. There's so much happening. There's really big forces, there's forces of life, there's high angelic beings that are behind the creation of a new life. And like, most women go about, you know, in a totally like physical way, just trying to get the thing to happen, you know, and there's so much magic behind what's really happening. Um, and when we forget about that and when we don't put attention there, like so many women trying to get pregnant and they're not able to, and it's so disheartening to them. They get into really like intense, I guess you could even say like victim levels around like, I don't know what's happening with my body's not working properly, I'm broken, why can't I have this baby? Like everyone else around me is having babies and I can't. And it's a really devastating and intensely charged experience for women. And so it's also such a really intense, deep biological wanting. It's probably the most intense desire that you can experience in this life, you know, to procreate, to have a baby. This is the force of nature that's the continuation of life on the earth, and it's moving through you. It's a big thing. And yet it gets turned outwards, and it gets turned towards like just the pure physical aspect of it. And it's like, okay, I'm going to take all these medications, I'm going to take all these shots, I'm going to, you know, eat all the right things and yada, 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 yada. And it doesn't work. And, you know, eventually, you know, women do get pregnant this way, and yet they can be totally spiritually and energetically exhausted by the end of it. And, you know, that's not the goal. I'm totally happy to work with women who are doing IVF, which is in vitro fertilization, and IUI, intrauterine insemination. These are different reproductive, assisted reproductive techniques that you can do to help you have a baby. Totally happy to work with women who are doing that. And I want to bring the spiritual experience. I want to bring this experience of life and creation and connection into this experience that can feel really overwhelming and deeply disconnected.
So beautiful. It's exactly what we need. And it's amazing to me that how much in our society, like it's not, I guess, for how long that has been an integral part of birth, right? This notion that there's a portal happening, and like you said, there's a soul that's incarnating, and that's a big deal. And yet for not so long, compared to if you look at all of human evolution and how long we've been in tribes that honor that, and for this very short amount of time, it's just been materialized. So this disconnection, like when we don't even have that context for how to relate to birth, there's just not enough information and people that we can connect with that kind of have this level of relatability and also know how to navigate those realms. And so it's really, really beautiful that this is something that you do. So I'm curious about hearing about some of your stories, like any kinds of examples or stories that you have about, again, like across the board, women that are going through this, because this experience that you're talking about feeling like going into a victim state, what's wrong with my body, I'm broken. I know that from clients I've worked with, just with sexuality, like there's something about just, it feels like there's something related there with like, where is my life force? Where is my energy? Where is my, you know, this juicy part of me that's supposed to be able to be here and be active, and I feel cut off from it, or like it's not here. And so it's interesting how that, obviously sexuality and fertility are related because, well, for many reasons. But so I would love it if you went into that, but also this state of like moving a woman from a place of this victimhood mentality, and like how you actually bring them into this state of really being able to feel connection to that life force and then actually bring life into the world. I mean, that to me is so miraculous on a certain level, that's something that you very tangible, like it's a very tangible thing that you do with women. So the floor is yours in any direction there, but I would love to hear some stories and just your vision on that process.
Yeah, first I'll give a little bit of context and then I'll tell a story. So the context would be feminine power.
Mm.
Um, we live in a world where power is masculine. We know how to dominate. We know how to get things done through action and to-do lists. And we know how to compete for what we want, to get ahead. And, like as women, we have, through the course of time, through the late 1800s and the 1960s, women have fought, and we're still fighting, but these are pivotal moments where women have fought for equality and saying, I want to have power. And the way that we've gotten power is through becoming more masculine and through gaining masculine power, because that is how we view power in the world, and that's how we value power. And so when you talk about, or when I talk about feminine power, there's kind of this like, oh, what is that? There's this like deep, mysterious, unknown, there's no words for it. It's kind of uninhabited, unclaimed territory. And yet it's something very powerful. In Chinese medicine, we have this concept of yin and yang, and I'm sure you've heard about it. And it's basically polarities that are equal and opposite. And so as we have the yang polarity that we know about, and it's full of power, we also have the yin polarity, or the feminine polarity, that is equally full of power. And yet it's something that is underutilized, and it's something that is undervalued and that we don't really know about. And the reason it's so important, it's important generally in your life as a woman or a man. But the reason it's so important in fertility, pregnancy, and birth is because those things are 100% feminine power. So women go about trying to get pregnant in the masculine way, and they do, and they do, and they go, and they go, and they do all the right things, and yet it's not working. And it's because they're using masculine power to try to get it done, as opposed to diving into the depth of feminine power. And I'll use birth as an example. Birth is 100% feminine power.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, like you have no control over it. You can't, masculine your way through it. It's something very deep that happens inside of you. And you have to be both strong and open. So, that's the nature. One of the things around feminine power is like being strong and open. And it's not like, oh, I'm just going to be open and like let everything in, like that's, I'm just going to be nice and open. That's how we think of the feminine, it's like, okay, those are some aspects of the feminine, like kindness, sweetness, nurturing, some aspects, but you also have, it's such a large range. It's such a huge range of qualities in the feminine that go together. They're not opposites. So like birth is raw, wild power of life coming through you, and you can't grasp against it or it doesn't happen. Like you have to open deeply inside of it and let that power move through you. And as you do that, you become the power, you touch the power of life. And this is the essence of what it is to have feminine power. It's not to control or to, to grasp against or close against. It's something that you open deeply to, and that moves you, and it's wild and it's raw in that way. So number one, I give women the context around, so what is feminine power? And it's something that I myself am still exploring and still putting words to. There's so many feminine forces and deep, mysterious forces that are feminine. And I'm talking about like real power, like real force that you can touch into and have access to. I was watching this Planet Earth or Life or something. It's one of those nature videos, and they were showing whales mating. And so this female whale just comes up and she smashes the water to let the males know she's there. And then she starts swimming, and all of these male whales start racing after her, and they're fighting and they're like bashing each other. And basically there's one male left at the end, and then he gets the woman. And I'm like, that shows so well the difference between masculine power and feminine power. Like the feminine whale embodies this feminine power. Like she's not doing anything per se, but she has this deep force of magnetism that make all of these male whales just go wild after her. So yeah, that would be the context. I'm really helping women to own and connect with feminine power, and sexuality is a part of this. Sexuality can be talked about in so many different ways, but I like to talk about it in the context of energetic centers. So we've all heard about chakras in the Indian tradition of meditation and yoga, and basically they're energetic centers that go up and down the center of the body. And you have the crown, the third eye, the throat, the heart, the belly, one at the perineum or the root. And then you also have centers that go down into the earth and then up above your head. And my meditation practice is an energetic-based meditation practice. So we work with these different energetic centers, awakening them and activating their functionality. So each center has a different functionality that you can activate. And the centers in the belly and in the perineum and that go down into the earth, these are the centers that have and contain the power of life. Like you hold your baby, you create your baby in your belly. You know, this is like where you have sex. This is where the energy of life and sexual energy and reproduction take place. And this is also the place where we are connected into the earth and grounded down into our bodies. There's a lot of power and strength and might in the belly, the perineum, and down into the earth. Japanese martial artists, when they train, they're really training to ground themselves into what they call the hara, which is the belly center. And they become strong and they're grounded and they're rooted down into the earth. And so part of the way that I work with women is helping them get in touch with these energetic centers and get rooted down and grounded down into their body and into their sexual energy. So I've been talking a lot. Do you have any questions from here? I still have a story to tell, but just wanted to.
I mean, no, this is great. This is great. This is all, I feel like I'm part of why I was like, yeah, let's do an interview is because I know that you have so much of this, not just knowledge, like that's one of the things that I love. And one of the reasons, again, why I wanted to interview you is there's one thing for people to pass. I think there's a lot of theory that goes around these things. And especially in like the new age scene, there's a lot of spiritual theory and concepts and ideas, but it's far different when you are talking and speaking to someone who's actually had levels of experience and integration with coming into touch with these forces. And so when you like, that's one of the things I love about listening to you is I can actually literally feel these places that you're speaking to and talking about. So please talk as much as you want. Because for me, this is like gold. And this is part of what I'm like, I want the world to know about this and to know about what you do, because it's potent. It's really potent. And it's like you said, there's a level of really having the proper context that's grounded that I think is so vital and powerful for women in general, whether they want to get pregnant or not, to know about these forces that we're connected to, and that we do innately have them. Like, it's not that they're lost or any one of us was born without them. It's just there's different techniques and things that we do and can do to help to get ourselves and get each other in touch with these places of life force that you're talking about. And so I think, I would love to hear the stories. But first, I want to know a little bit more about how you see birth. Like, you said birth takes place in these centers in the belly. Do you see that connected all the way through all of the chakra centers that you mentioned as well? Like, is there this, do you see it as a collaboration of these centers? Does it normally come from like one or two of them? Or like, what is your experience with that?
Well,
Because you're
yeah,
talking
and
about these forces, multiple centers, so I'm just wondering about kind of your vision there.
yeah, I mean, we're a whole being, and so none of these centers, none of these centers works by themselves. We're kind of an integrated system, and that's true in the physical body as well as in the energetic body. And um, yeah, the reason I talk about these centers below is because as modern humans, we seem to be quite disconnected from them.
Mm.
And, we live, as modern humans, we live so much in our heads. We really value thought and ideas. We sit at computers, at our desks all day. We're on our phones. Like, we're very much in our minds. And so there's so much energy happening here all the time. And there's not really a lot of energy, focus, attention, embodiment or inhabiting of our lower centers, of our pelvis. And so what happens is, I see this a lot in, I talked about the victim mentality that people can get into around having a baby and, just around anything in life. And that victim mentality resides in, or that feeling of being a victim to, resides at the level of our beliefs, our minds, our emotions. And that is in the realm of our mental and emotional body. And so we're actually putting stories on top of life. We're putting our belief systems, stories on top of the experiences that we're having, to understand them, to categorize them, to say this experience is good and I want it, or this experience is bad and I don't want it. But it's not actually the experience. And so when women get really stuck in their head, and I see this too, not just around women trying to get pregnant, but also around women who are about to give birth, especially if it's their first one. I'm doing a talk. I've been doing talks recently called How to Have an Empowered Birth. And it's usually women who are, going to be first-time mothers who come up and they're like, I'm freaked out. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm feeling really anxious. And it's because they're living here in their heads, and the stories they're telling themselves is like, what's this going to be like? I don't think I can do it. It's, there's all of these things I can't control. I can't control the contractions. I can't control if I have bodily excretions. I can't control if there's tearing, like maybe I have to have a C-section. There's all of these things that you can't control. And so they're just spinning out in their minds around it. And so what I do is, I give them the whole context, and then I just place my hands on their hips. And I'm like, okay, put your hands on your belly and just come down, like come down into your belly. Feel your hands on your belly, bring yourself down and just feel sensations. Does it feel warm? Does it feel cool? Is it smooth? Is it open? Is it, like what are the sensations that you're feeling here? And it takes about, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and all of a sudden, boom, like I feel them dropping deep down into their pelvis. And what happens is that their mind goes silent. Thank God. All of the stories drop, they all go away, and they're just feeling the life in their belly. And, one woman said, this is weird, but I feel strong and open. I'm like, yes, that's exactly how you should feel at birth, being strong and open. And another woman was like, oh my God, I feel, she was about to give birth in a week. And she was like, I just feel so different. Like, I feel like I can do this. And that's the difference between the victim in your mind and then the feeling of like power in your belly. And, the things that I tell them is that your body knows. Your body knows how to do this. You are one of billions upon billions of women who have given birth over the history of time. Your body knows what to do. Like, you can rest on it, you can be in it, you can trust it. And so a lot of what I do is bringing women just down into their pelvis, just to feel what it's like there. And once you drop down into it, there's a sense of feeling grounded, feeling confident, feeling strong, There's a sense of power and empowerment just as the nature of resting in these lower centers that are connected to the earth and connected to the power of life. So I'm getting women connected both down into that for their own experience. And I'm also waking those centers up in women, turning them on, because that's where the power to reproduce comes. It's a power of nature. It's a power of life. And yeah.
So much magic. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so, I mean, obviously, again, like I said, sexuality and fertility are so related, and I can really name that from my experience of doing some of the subtle body work that we do here, and the work on like how much of my path has been related to my sexuality, and how I've been on both ends of that spectrum of being like, where is my life force? Where is my vitality? And now I work a lot with clients that are in that same level, and how what you're saying about how cerebral we are, and how incredible it is when you actually are able to unblock the blockages or the disconnection from these lower centers, and like you're saying, the centers below, where your life can completely change. Like your whole perspective of yourself from there is so much different, because it's not, like you're saying, in the mind. And the power and magnificence and sacredness and ferocity and beauty all in one energy that moves through us innately, that again, like we all have connection to. It's just finding and having the proper facilitation of getting into these places in our body, getting into these forces that move through us, that like, I mean, it is really incredible, and something that I don't think we fathom enough of how much the power and the will of nature and the force of nature is alive in us. And that's what's continued to make everything thrive for millions of years. Like that isn't, and that's encoded into the human body. And I think that that's so beautiful, that, to really be able to connect women with that force of empowerment. And I've seen women, like I've seen my friends that have had children, and how different they are after, especially the ones that have done home births and have just completely done it themselves. And something just changes, because that when they really surrender to that force and allow it to move through them, it feels alchemical with how it changes how they sit, how they are in their body. So yeah, I mean, I would love to, again, like anything else on that line, like how does it change? Because we're talking about birth, which we tend to think about the baby and the baby's experience, but there's this whole alchemical change in the woman who is birthing creation into form, and her incarnation as well as the soul's incarnation. And so before we dive in, because there's this whole line of incarnation and your connection with the soul of the child that's coming in and how you work with their timeline, that I really want to talk about. But before we dive into that, I would love to dive more into like, what are the changes? Like you said that they are less in their mind. Like, what else do you see that changes in women's subtle bodies of energy when they give birth, or when they're going through this process of creation and like, cooking a baby, or that's the terminology we use here, but as a baby is really being cultivated and grown inside of us, like what is it that you see happening in that process? And then how does the work that you do help facilitate that to be more healthy, to like support the growing fertility in the women that you work with?
Yeah, well said. Birth is definitely an initiation that happens, with any baby, but especially with your first, because you're both birthing a new life into the world, and you're also becoming a mother. And that's different. That's different than what you were before. Your subtle bodies go through a transformation. And that's actually one of the powers of the feminine, is this deep transformation, because it's something that we go through when we give birth. We become different. We have this big, deep transformation. And it's also something that happens during perimenopause and into menopause. We also have another deep, subtle body transformation. And it really does change us. It changes who we are. And as a mother, there's just, there's actually a deepening, there's a deepening into the centers below. This is where you hold your baby. This is like something of you wakes up. It's kind of animal, you could say, but exactly where your baby is. I have funny experiences of my own mom. She always knew where we were and what we were up to, and if we were getting into trouble or not. You just have this deep knowing that comes online as a mother. It's like you're into, you're, especially as a new mother, you've just given birth, like you are that baby's world. This little one survives because of you. And so you're deeply connected, and it can't communicate with you yet. So you're really deeply connected to this little person, and you know what it means, and you know what's happening. Even, sometimes in your mind, you can't figure it out, or you get frustrated, or, maybe the baby's not latching properly, or there's all these things that can happen after birth. But somewhere inside of you, there's this deep intuition that turns on, where you're really connected to this other person in a deep way. And that's something that you can, cultivate as a new mother. You can ride, you can consciously connect to this awakening that's happening inside of you. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love how that speaks to the mysterious nature of what's going on, and how no matter how cerebral and very locked in the material world we've gotten in this world, it's one of those things that you can't deny. Like, people will still talk about the mother's intuition and this sixth kind of sense that comes online. And so it is like there's something that has changed in the physiology of the body, but then also there's this seemingly separate being that there's some kind of connection to, that's non-physical. Like, we can't necessarily see it, but that there is that somewhat of a, like you're saying, a knowing, like how your mom knew where you were. Like my mom had a similar thing, where something just knows, something's just connected to the energy of this child that you've created. So I would love to know too, like, before we dive into the magic of connecting a woman to, or helping kind of co-facilitate this birthing process with the soul of the child that's incarnating, do you have any more stories that you want to share, or you could share with us, about bringing a woman from a space of this victim space of feeling infertile into this fully blossomed birthing mother? Because I think that's something that we've touched on a bit, but I would love to hear like one of your personal stories about really helping a woman from literally like her perceiving herself, and even maybe being perceived by Western medicine as being infertile, to actually the forces of nature waking up in her body and blossoming through her.
Well, the story I'd like to share, she was 43, and she had been pregnant twice before, but recently, before I saw her, like within the year, before she came to me. But both of those babies were chromosomally, had chromosomal issues, which is called trisomy. Basically, the egg is not dividing properly, and it doesn't divide properly because it doesn't have enough energy. And this happens quite often to women as they get older. So it's a more common experience for women in their early 40s or 40s to have that happen. And she was a very strong person, very fit, in some ways connected to her life force. And yet she had to, she didn't know that. So the babies get tested at week 12 for their genetics. And so she carried both of these babies to week 12, and then found out that they had these chromosomal issues, and they weren't going to live, for very long, and it was going to be a really, devastating experience. So she had to give birth to both of these babies. And that's just like it's a tragic experience. Like I'm starting to tear up as I'm talking about it. Yeah, so when she comes to me, and she's going to try IVF, because on IVF you can actually test the embryo, so you can know if they're genetically viable or not. So she comes to me like 2 weeks before that, and she's like, yeah, she doesn't know that if she can make a genetically healthy baby, and she's so scared because the devastation that she experienced having to give birth to these two babies who were not living is, it's like, I don't know if I can face that experience again. And but I saw this impulse, and I'll talk about this more later, but it's like this impulse from, held by spiritual beings. And it was so strong. It was so strong in her. Like, I was like, okay, there is this window, there's spiritual backing for you to have this baby. And so I was feeling very confident about it, just because of the amount of like spiritual help that I felt for her to have this baby. And so that's mainly, what I'm looking for actually. And is there this impulse? Is there this spiritual impulse, a window in time, a potential for this woman to have a baby? And when I feel that, then that's what I'm working with. That's what I'm attuning to. That's what I'm aligning with. And I'm connecting the woman's body to that impulse that I feel. And so she went to have her IVF cycle, and it didn't end up working. Like, she didn't end up getting pregnant from it. But I had this experience, like I worked with her partner a couple times as well. And I just felt this impulse, from the light that I've been feeling, like, I want to see both of you at the same time. And since I do energetic work, I can just hold both of them together. And so I had them both in the room at the same time. And there was so much light. There was so much light from spiritual realms. And at one point I felt this, it was like this, it was like a bubble of essence. And it was dropped down into both of them from above. And I'd never seen that before. And so it felt really special. I'm like, wow. And see that, so I come from a Chinese medicine background, and the energy needed to create a new life is called essence, or Jing. It's basically the quintessence of your energy. It's the most subtle, most precious of your energy that goes into creating a new life. And so that's what needed to be supported. There's something of her deep essence that needed to be rejuvenated so that her eggs would be nourished enough to be able to divide properly and make this baby. So she didn't end up getting pregnant from the IVF cycle, which happened maybe a week after we did that practice. I did that healing with both of them. But then I talked to her afterwards, and I was like, well, would you want to consider doing it naturally again? We can work for about 3 months. We can, get your body prepared. We can nurture your life force. We can unblock any energetic blockages to your pelvic envelope, to your pelvis. We can work with your heart, because you asked earlier, are there other centers? The heart is actually a really big one. The heart center works closely with the belly, especially in creating this opening and this receptivity to the spiritual light from above to, incarnate this being inside of you. And so I'm like, we can work on your energy. We can build you up. We can open the flows of life into your pelvis. We can nourish your heart. We can strengthen your heart. And so we started doing that process, and a couple of weeks later, she came to me and she was like, yeah, so we had unprotected sex the other day. There was just this really beautiful space and we just went for it. And I, so I took her pulse and I was like, oh, well, you have a pulse that means you could be pregnant. So I didn't have, it's kind of a later session in the evening and I didn't have anyone after that. And so I was like, why don't we go down to the store really quickly? There's a CVS right around the corner and just take a pregnancy test right now. Because the way that I would work it with her if she was pregnant would be different than the way that I work with her if she's not. So she went, she took the pregnancy test and the line was so faint, because she was just about 2 weeks pregnant. But you could already start to feel it in the pulse, which is really exciting. And so it's like, I think you may be pregnant. And she was like, maybe, I think so. Like, I'm going to keep taking the tests. But anyways, we did the session and she kept taking the tests and the line got stronger and stronger and stronger. And so that was really exciting. And, but she was still really afraid, because she has to wait 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, well, why don't you keep coming weekly for 12 weeks so that I could support her through that experience. And it was just a magical time because, the light of the baby was strong, this beautiful golden light, these beautiful spiritual presences were there the whole time. And so I was connecting her to that. She'd come in and she'd be afraid and in the fear state, and I would connect her to that light and something deep inside of her would start relaxing and opening. I would, I would hold different, energetic places on her body to help her energy open, to help her energy receive, to help her heart, relax down into her belly, to help move any stagnancy in her body that comes from, just both life, but also like the fear around it, the holding back, because part of her didn't want to actually drop down into her belly to feel what was happening because she was so afraid of being connected to the baby. So I was just helping that process, it's kind of like slowly, gently, just keeping reflecting to her, opening her heart, helping her heart connect with her belly, helping her feel what was happening in her belly. And I would also sing. I would sing to her baby. I learned these like magical songs from Raven Lang. She was like one of the first midwives and acupuncturists in California, and she believes in the power of song. And when she sings, it moves you, it touches you, it brings tears. And so I was singing, to her baby, and something like it deeply opened and relaxed inside of her. And so, in this process, it's helping her through this experience, but it's also creating, like keeping the flows open, keeping the flows between the heart and the belly, the heart and the uterus open, and keeping the life force flowing into her belly to support this pregnancy. It's really important to support a pregnancy during the first trimester because that's when most of the things can go wrong. That's when a lot of miscarriages can happen. When you're into your second trimester, you're usually good. It's going, the momentum's happening. But in the first trimester, it's really important to support the pregnancy and make sure that everything's like moving in the way that it should. So I worked with her through week 12, and her baby was totally healthy. Something in her could deeply relax and just start to enjoy the pregnancy. So it was this beautiful experience of both helping her, working with her body to receive life and be connected to life, like allow these flows of life to happen inside of her. And then also working with these spiritual presences and the soul of the baby, the incarnation of the baby, to like hold this line of incarnation and help her to feel that so she could hold that herself as she went through her week, as well as connecting her to the archetype of the mother, like this is what it feels like to be mother. And you can rest on that inside of you because you're not the only mother, you know, like you're one of, again, billions upon billions of mothers, and it's something that's bigger than you. And there's these like forces, there's the archetype of the mother, there's even divine presences like the divine mother, you know, as you can see in different archetypes like the Virgin Mary or the Black Madonna or Pachamama or Demeter. You know, there's all these different archetypes from different cultures that hold the power of being a mother. And so when you're feeling disconnected, when you're feeling scared, when you're feeling tired or exhausted, like it's important to remember that you're not alone and that you have help. You have help, and you can open, you can let the help in, you can connect to the help, you can connect to these, you know, the cosmic mother, these bigger forces, and allow them to flow through you, allow them to give through you. And so I guess that's another one of the things that I do and that I did with her, was helping connect her to these higher forces that she could rest on, so she didn't feel alone.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And I do, you know, I want to reiterate from my personal experience of having, again, like from, you can hear a lot of, like, there's a lot of the talk about the divine mother and about the divine feminine, and it can stay in this very ideological space, I think, for most people, where it's a really beautiful concept. But again, like the amount of intensive work that you've done and the way that you connect to these forces, it brings it from this intangible idea to these real, true living presences. And so the first of all, the rarity, I think, to find someone that has the ability to really create that bridge is huge. Like, it's so precious that that's a line that you hold, not only with incarnation and being so grounded. I think this is one of the things that I really, really appreciate about you, is you're so grounded, you're so here, you're so present, and yet there is this very high, you know, ladder above your head that reaches to these spaces where these non-physical forces that are normally very abstract can really be felt. And so to be able to really bridge, and we were talking about, you had said in Chinese medicine that there's really this connection between heaven and earth, and how, you know, the teaching behind that is that the human being is the bridge, which is why I love that you spoke to the heart as well, and how the heart really helps to, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, of course, the heart helps to incarnate the soul through birth, because it really feels like, you know, the middle of that cross point of incarnation in between spiritual and physical realms. But the fact that it's really beautiful to me that you not only hold that line for your clients through being it and through holding a bigger space so that they can come into a greater sense of their will that they've been disconnected from, that it are these forces of nature and these higher forces of like the divine mother energies and other spiritual presences, that, I mean, it's really amazing that there's these whole teams of beings that they literally, their existence is to help this process. And yet how many women feel disconnected or like they don't have help. And so that you really do create a space of this very tangible experience, and maybe people don't feel like 1, 2, 3 beings, but there's this presence that can create like almost like a cocooning effect or holding effect around them. And then they start to feel that living essence of being that bridge between heaven and earth too. And it's just really beautiful to me, like how powerful that is, because it's such a rarity. It's a very esoteric teaching, but birth is such a very direct way, pregnancy is such a very direct way for us to experience something that's all these things that are so esoteric really in the embodiment process. And that creates healing. I mean, I can only imagine how much healing that woman got from going through such intense trauma and into incarnating and like birthing a super healthy baby that she got to hold in her body. It makes me wonder too, I wonder if, I know we have to finish up here, we're almost at 5. Let's see. I think that we've actually covered almost everything that we wanted to cover this time around. Um, I wanted to see if quickly in the time we have, it's up to you, if you could touch on like abortion as well, and like what happens in the energy body when women experience abortion, because that's a pretty common one. And I think that my experience of the teachings and the techniques that through the training here is so unique and so necessary or needed, as far as what happens to the subtle bodies when we go through abortion, what can be helped, like how we can rejuvenate the body after something like that. So is there anything that you want to touch on or add there as well?
Sure, that's a great question. I've actually worked with women, after they have abortions to help their body, as you said, rejuvenate. So what can happen is, we there's so many parts to us as a human being, and that's one of the difficulties of being human. We have these high spiritual parts, and we have these animal parts, and we have our personality, and all of these parts of us are vying for attention. And so it can happen that you get pregnant, and wherever you are in your life or whatever's happening, or maybe you just don't want kids at all, so you decide not to have the baby. And yet your belly, your uterus, the feminine parts of you, down in these like deep, more nature parts of you, that's all they want. That's their sole purpose in life. That's the reason you cycle every single month. Like, your belly wants a baby so bad. And so even if you decide not to have a baby and that's the right choice, that doesn't mean that some part of you doesn't want it. And so it's just really good to have that understanding, because it can be, it can be an intense experience, like it can be an intense experience for your heart, for your belly. And so it's really important to hold yourself in that way, after, like, because you go under for anesthesia, like have a group of women that you really trust holding space for you as you go through that experience. And when you come out, be really gentle with yourself, give yourself space and time to feel things, to heal, because your body does need to be healed. Your body was starting to engage this process of life and creation, and it's suddenly aborted. And so your body doesn't necessarily understand what's going on. And I've also seen in some people where they hold on, their belly holds on to these fragments or pieces. It's not physical, it's energetic, of the baby, because it's like, okay, well, this is still my baby. And so it's holding on somewhere and it's not letting go. And so I work with these women, and I'm kind of just telling their belly on this non-physical way, in this energetic way, like, okay, this actually isn't your baby, like you can let it go. And oh, okay, and it starts to let go. And so it's really important to make sure that there's no energetic fragments left in your belly, because that can cause all sorts of issues at the level of your reproduction, of your sexuality, if you want to try to get pregnant again in the future. So yeah, it's important to like make sure that everything's flushed out, everything's cleared, as well as giving your body, your heart, your belly, the time and space to heal.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because I know that there's women, it's more common now that I have a lot of friends who have gone through that process, but again, the same level of pregnancy and not having context, like as a proper context for what to do in the aftercare stages and these deep levels that were affected. So thank you so much. This
Yeah,
has
thank you
been
so much.
amazing
It has
and
been amazing.
super joyful. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to connect with Corinne, I'll link her in this post. And then if you look up, we can leave in the comments link to her online group where she's going to be doing more, like giving more information and doing more live feeds and live interactive stuff called Tea and Fertility.
Well,
And all of her offerings can be found on her website.
I was going to say, actually, the Facebook group will be called Dragon Blossom Fertility. And then I will be holding weekly Saturday Facebook Lives called Tea and Fertility, where we'll get together and talk about different aspects of fertility. Yeah, every week.
Okay, beautiful. So next that Dragon Blossom Fertility, that's what you want to search for. And is dragonblossomfertility.com your website?
It's actually dragonblossomhealing.com, but Instagram is Dragon Blossom Fertility. And so I'm doing a lot of stuff on Instagram now. So you can check me out there too.
Awesome. So we will leave a list of this video of all the ways you can get in contact with Corinne, whether you want to do it for one-on-one work, consultation work, and any other inquiries you have for her. And yeah, I'm excited. I want to do another one with you, but I need to come up with more questions for you.
I would love to do it again.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
And also too, if like just to put out there too, because this is your first interview, if there's other people that want to work with you, collaborate with you, like interview you on their podcasts or do any kinds of collaboration, you're open for that as well, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Cool. All right. Well, bye everyone, and thanks for
Bye.
tuning in.